3, 2. Hello, everyone. We are so excited to have you join us today. What better way to kick off the first quarter of the year and the first webinar in February than to have Dr. Miles Bodzin from Cash Practice here to talk about skyrocketing cash collections, which, hey, that is important to everybody, but especially when you're seeing more and more patients with high deductibles and copays. In case you are not familiar with Dr. Miles Bodzin, he is the founder and CEO of Cash Practice Systems, is a chiropractor who became known as the king of patient retention. And just a little known fact, when he was in chiropractic college, he was also known as Miles Notes because he is an incredible note taker and a wealth of knowledge. He has perfected the cash practice system while in his own practice, which had a patient visit average of, hear this, over 300. He speaks internationally on the topic of client retention. His company and software is absolutely amazing. It's a web-based software for chiropractors to streamline their practices, and they deliver exactly what they're telling you that they can do. It's amazing. They've helped thousands of chiropractic offices collect more cash in their practice, skyrocket their patient retention, and reduce their dependence on insurance. If you are going to be in Parker, Vegas in the next couple of weeks, Dr. Bodzin and a couple of members of his team, Dr. Margie Smith and the incredible Holly Jensen, will all be speaking at Parker, Vegas. And I will tell you, you will surely regret it if you do not take the opportunity to sit in their class, or if you have an opportunity to see them speaking at an event live near you. Trust me when I tell you, you want to be in the front row because they are absolutely amazing. So now I'm just going to be quiet, turn it over to Dr. Bodzin. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me. Christy, you're the only one that when you do my introduction, I can't help but smile ear to ear. You just make me sound so good. I really appreciate it. And I have to say, that is the first introduction I've ever received where someone mentioned my Miles Notes. That's pretty cute that you go all the way back to my chiropractic college days to bring that up. That's very, very cute of you. And introducing that to everybody. A lot of people don't know that. It's funny, today, once in a while, I still get doctors who are classmates of mine or went to school with me back in the early 90s who will bring up Miles Notes. So it's kind of cute to hear a blast from the past. So today's topic, skyrocket your cash collections even when patients have high deductibles and copays. If I was looking at you all in the face right now and asked you, as I did this last weekend when we put on a seminar here in San Diego, how many of you are seeing high deductibles and copays? And I'm sure every one of your hands would be raised right now because it is so common. It's actually become the norm where patients are coming in with copays very high and deductibles in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, in that range. In fact, just recently on Facebook, I posted just a couple of weeks ago an image showing a copay from an insurance company that allowed 20 visits, and the patient's copay was, get this, $100. That was the patient's copay. If you go to my Facebook page, Miles Bodzin's Facebook page, you'll see an image I posted where I cannot believe that it says they cover chiropractic and they cover 20 visits, and yep, but they have a $100 copay. So that was a just recent posting. So with that being said, let's get into today's topic of what do you do? How do you increase cash collections? How do you do this when a patient comes in with a really high deductible? And let's just get rolling into it. First and foremost, I need to state this antitrust statement. This is pretty common for us to put out, as well as I know ChiroHealthUSA, when they do their seminars, ChiroHealthUSA puts out their seminars. We always want to talk about the fact that we obviously will talk about fees. We can't be stating anything that says these are the fees you should be charging. Those fees are just for example purposes. By no means, as a group here, am I suggesting that you charge the same fees that we're using in these examples. The other thing I'll mention is that we can't be saying we're boycotting any insurance company or anything of that nature. So in the event, any kind of subject matter of, insurance comes up, by no means am I suggesting that you leave an insurance company or as a group boycott any particular insurance companies. That is not a suggestion at all. So let's get into today's topic. I like to just start off giving you a positive message, and that is you can successfully enroll patients when they have high deductible insurance. There's no doubt you can do it. We see it happening all the time when doctors are taught how to do this properly, and that's the goal today, is to show you how you actually have a patient who has a high deductible and actually get care in your practice. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be paying you out of pocket. So you can almost think of them as a cash patient. But we got to do some things first before we treat them that way. Why should you be listening to me? Christy, you did a great job introducing me, but I just want to give a little background. This is a picture of me here, probably around the year 2000. I think it's around 2002, maybe 2001, 2000, somewhere in that range. That's me on the far right there with the goatee there, and that right there in the center. You mentioned Holly Jensen. That's Holly right there in the center there with the Hawaiian dress, and then to our right, to her left is Laura, who also works for me still, who works at Cash Practice. Holly's going on 18 years working with me. Laura is going on, I think, 15 years. I think it's something around there that she's been working with me and at Cash Practice now. And I share this picture with you because I want you to see that the where I was. Let me kind of tell a little story to kind of set the tone here. Why you should be listening to me, in essence, what I'm saying here, and that is in 1994 when I opened my practice, which is when I opened the Chiropractic Wellness Center. I want you to imagine a time, and some of you may have been in practice at this time, some of you may not have been, but in 1994 here in Southern California, when I opened the Chiropractic Wellness Center, and I want you to notice it's not the Chiropractic Back and Neck Pain Center. It's a wellness type model practice. At that time period in Southern California, everybody who came in to see me at that time, probably 9 out of 10 people were part of this new thing. They had an HMO or a PPO. They were part of some kind of managed care. That was all the rage in the early 90s. And here I was, a young kid out of school wanting to run a wellness type practice, and nobody came in for wellness. Everybody wanted either neck or back pain because that's what chiropractors marketed. Every yellow page ad was either a picture of a guy bent over with lightning bolts flying out of his back or 2 cars crashing. That was the picture of chiropractic. And in some places, that's still the picture of chiropractic, but that's what it was in the early 90s. And every patient who came into me, probably 9 out of 10, came in with some kind of managed care that I was not part of. And I tell you this because the intention was I wanted to take care of my patients, but I wasn't able to because these people came in with this high level of, this insurance that I wasn't part of, and I had to figure out. And in essence, I struggled a lot is what I kind of want to get to is I struggled a lot in those first couple of years to really kind of figure out what did it take to have patients who I had to actually charge out of pocket outside of their insurance and have them get care. To eventually I got to a place where I went from struggle to where I couldn't afford to pay rent to where I was really ready to close up shop, and went from that place to eventually having a practice of very high success in a cash-based model, where my practice ran about 80% cash, 20% insurance or so, give or take, and to a place where I had a very high PVA that Christy mentioned, just over 300 visits. When I sold my practice in 2011 to focus 100% of my energies on Cash Practice, the company, at that time, our stats show that my average patient had been with me just over 300 visits. And for those of you who are intrigued by that story, want to learn more about it, you can go see our movie. We actually produced a movie this last year called The Calling. You can go to thecallingmovie.com at a later time and watch that movie. I would say wait a few days before you watch it because we actually just premiered a remastered version of the movie. We actually added some additional scenes to the movie that we haven't released on Amazon yet, and we will get those out in the next couple of days. But you can go to thecallingmovie.com and you can learn more about it. It's actually the story of being called to become a chiropractor. And every chiropractor I've shown it to or who has seen it has come back to us and said it inspired them to do more in chiropractic. It inspired some doctors we talked to that they went back into chiropractic after leaving chiropractic. At the seminar we just put on here in San Diego this last weekend, we had a doctor tell me he watched it 4 times because he said every time I watched it, it was his story. He just felt he could really identify it. So you chiropractors, if you feel like you're struggling in somewhere or you just need some inspiration about becoming a chiropractor or what it is to be a chiropractor, I believe you'll find inspiration from that movie. And Christy, I believe you sharing everybody the story about Miles Notes, I think you got that from watching the movie because we do tell that little piece of the story in the movie. What I want to share with you now on your screen are some examples of clients of ours. And what I'm attempting to do here, I like to be totally transparent with everything I do. And what I'm doing here is I want to prove to you that if you follow the things I'm about to teach you, that you can have success in practice. That's ultimately what I'm doing here. Just like you would do with patients, you want to show examples of other people you've helped with chiropractic. I want to show you some examples of doctors who've been helped by using the stuff I'm about to teach you, or some of the stuff I'm about to teach you right now. What you see on your screen right here is about 10 years worth of statistics. And the stats you're seeing are their quarterly cash collections. This is not insurance money, this is cash money. And if for any of you on the call right now who are thinking, I'm talking about going all cash, let me just stop you right there. You do not have to give up insurance to do this. So if any of you are on right now thinking, well, I'm not interested in being all cash, I want to still be able to accept insurance, by all means, you absolutely can. What I'm showing you right here is just strictly the cash collections in a practice over a 10-year span. And the reason I'm showing you such an extended period of time is because what shape is that graph? It's an upward sloping graph. And why that's so important over an extended period of time is the only practices that I know that continuously grow month after month and quarter after quarter and year after year, this is the same practice showing their collections, their cash collections year after year. The only ones that do that are the practices that continuously add new patients and don't what? And if you were all in front of me right now, you'd all shout out, don't lose patients. That's the only practice that do this. Anybody can teach any of you how to have a good month. I could teach you some strategies and you'll have a great month, maybe even a great quarter. But there's very few things you can do that consistently will grow the practice month after month, quarter after quarter, and year after year over such an extended period of time. Most practices, what we see is they'll plateau at some point. Here's another practice that shows over the course of about 7-8 years here, growing month after month, quarter after quarter, and year after year. And again, the only practices that I've observed, and I think you'll agree with this, that do this are the ones that continuously add practice members, add patients to your office, and don't lose them on the back end. So really what we're talking about is how do you build a practice with really high retention? So when we talk about having a practice where you're overcoming high deductibles and overcoming high copays and having more cash in the practice, really what we're trying to do here is build the practice of your dreams, which is a practice that has extraordinarily high retention, and you will not have to worry about, well, you just don't have to worry about your next new patient because you have so much revenue coming into the practice. You don't worry about the next new patient because at a bare minimum, you have your monthly income, your monthly expenses covered, and you have your practice being covered. What you're seeing right here is a graph that comes from Kaiser, and this is just simply showing the growth from 2010 to 2015. That red line represents the increase in deductibles, and they're just showing it from the standpoint of deductibles have risen significantly higher compared to how premiums have risen, as compared to how their earnings have risen. Now, this is a graph, obviously insurance companies are talking with themselves about it, like how our earnings are increasing and how our premiums going up, but how the deductibles have gone up. And doctors, the lesson for you is it's not going away. We're seeing these extraordinarily high deductibles where patients are coming in with $10,000 deductibles. And in essence, if you've been dependent upon people having insurance, they may still come in with insurance. But the reality is, as Dr. Ray Foxworth likes to say of ChiroHealthUSA, it's phantom insurance. They have it, but in the reality is they're not utilizing it in your practice. That's the reality of it. So you ultimately, whether you want to be more cash or not, have to face that. You have to face the fact that you're going to be dealing with more patients who are paying out of pocket, and you need to have a strategy for handling that. And that's what we're going to talk about next. We're going to get into how do you address this? Well, this is where it actually becomes really easy. Fortunately, we have this thing called HIPAA, and you might be going, fortunately, HIPAA's a pain. But the reality is HIPAA's your friend when it comes to high deductibles. Why is it your friend? And again, I have to give kind of credit. Again, I like to be totally transparent. I learned this from our good friends at ChiroHealthUSA, how to do this. And what it is through HIPAA, there's a regulation that allows patients to opt out of their insurance. They literally opt out. And you might be going, why do we want them to opt out when they have it? Here's the challenge. Let me just kind of brass tacks, got to get to the point. The challenge is when patients come with a high deductible, if they are using that insurance and you are submitting claims to the insurance to help meet that deductible, that's fine. But the reality is that you will not be able to provide any kind of discounts on those services. And you might be saying, well, I don't need a discount. I don't want a discount. Well, here's the model that we generally teach that seems to be the most successful in practice. And that is you have your high fees, or your normal fees, whatever you want to say, and you have that so that you're getting well reimbursed for your PI and your work comp and your insurances that do pay. But when patients are paying out of pocket, you need a way to reduce the cost. And we all know that ChiroHealthUSA is one of the ways you do that. But but in order to apply that discount, in order to apply it, you can only apply it to services that are quote unquote not covered. Let me repeat that. You can only apply any discounts to services that are not covered. Well, in order for these services that are going towards a high deductible to be not covered, the patient would actually have to not have insurance or opt out. And that's what we end up doing, is when patients come in with a high deductible that's higher than the amount of care you'll be providing. So if you're recommending $3,000 in services or $1,000 in services or whatever dollar amount you have, but they have a $5,000 deductible, the reality is they're never going to use that insurance in your practice. So what we find is a great strategy is to have the patient have the option to opt out. Now, there's some rules around this. You can't force them to do it. You can't say you must opt out. Ultimately, it's the patient's decision, but you can certainly talk about it. You can certainly mention it that you have this option for them to do so. And they might be going, why would I want to do that? Well, when you present it to them that if they opt out, in essence, they become a cash patient. If you want to think of it that way, they ultimately become a self-pay patient at that point, but you now have the freedom to apply any discounts to those services. That's what it gives you by them doing that. In essence, it converts them from a high deductible insurance patient, quote unquote, it converts them to a cash paying patient, if you want to think of it that way. So how do you do that? Well, there's an election to self-pay form. And again, I would thank my good friends at ChiroHealthUSA who created this form. And we want to give you an easy way to get it. Just right now, you can text it to. There's a lot of ways you can get it, but here's a simple way to do it right here. Text your ChiroHealthUSA self-pay. That's what we call it, ChiroHealthUSA self-pay, your name and email to that phone number right there, and we'll get an email out to you that has a link to download that self-pay form. There's actually two forms. I should go back to that last slide. There's an election, patient election to self-pay for services, which basically says I'm opting out of my insurance, and now I've become a cash patient, and now they're able to be treated the same way as a cash patient. There's also a second form called the revocation of patient election to self-pay, and that is in the event the patient at some point wants to revoke that, they want to use the insurance again, and they may do that because maybe they went to the hospital or they had some surgery or something and it used up their deductible, and now for the rest of the year they want to be able to utilize their insurance benefit. Now that the insurance deductible has been utilized, they can sign a form that basically says, I would like you to now I want to go back to using my insurance. So that's one of the really nice strategies. So when I teach strategies, I like to give you a clear-cut answer of when to apply that, or think of it as a tool in your toolbox. So the time to use this type of form is simply when the deductible is higher than the total amount of services you'll be providing for that patient. That's a good time to offer it. That's the time you use it. Now the question is, once they get that form, the next thing is providing a discount to those services. And you listening to this, right, you may have been taught this material already. I know ChiroHealthUSA teaches this material. A number of people teach what I'm about to share with you. So I'm going to keep this pretty brief. And that is, there's 4 ways of applying discounts to those services. Number 1 is required by mandate. Someone asked me, can I put the number back on the screen? Yes, I can. I'll be happy to do it. There you go. There's the phone number, 619-609-0521. Put that phone number into your phone, text ChiroHealthUSA Self-Pay, your name and your email, and we will get those forms to you. Okay? And I'll put up that. I have something else I'm going to offer you guys a little bit later as well. I'll give you guys, and I'll put the phone number up again, and we'll send everything to you guys all at once. So here we go. Develop a rock solid discounting policy. The only time we offer a discount is when? 4 times. 1, required by mandate. Okay, so that's your Medicare as an example. And some of you are going, wait a second, I don't discount Medicare. That's not what I do. Well, in essence, you do. When you have a fee, and I'm going to use an example, your fee is $60. When you agree to accept a Medicare patient, you've agreed to accept a discounted rate. Now, some of you think of that as a fee schedule, like a Medicare fee schedule. I'm going to teach you to remove confusion from your life and your practice. Forget about separate fee schedules. You have one fee. You don't have different fee schedules. You don't have a Medicare fee schedule. You don't have a work comp fee schedule. You don't have a Blue Shield fee schedule. You don't have those things. Stop saying it because you're creating confusion in your practice. What you have is a fee schedule. End of story. If you take Medicare patients, you've agreed to reduce your reimbursement. You've agreed to accept a discounted rate on your fee. So we call that required by mandate. That's your Medicare. Next is documented hardship. This is where you've agreed to accept a reduced reimbursement from someone who has a documented hardship. So an example is you say that all people who fall within 100% of the poverty guidelines for the U.S. poverty guidelines, they qualify for a certain percent discount, and you could define that. And if you want to learn more about documented hardships or have a program you can just put into place, I'm pretty confident that the one from KMC University, Kathy Mills Chang's program, they sell a documented hardship program that you could purchase, which comes with all the documents and everything you need. So that's a great program for if you want to use that. The one thing I'll say about documented hardship, it should not be for all of your practice members. This is something that's used in less than 5% of your practice. And it's typically, the other thing I'll mention about it is that it is not Here's what it's not. And I want to say this because sometimes I see doctors doing this and they're doing it by mistake. Documented hardship is you don't use that as a reason for giving someone who's a cash patient a discount. That is not allowed. That's not what it is. It has nothing to do with whether they're cash or insurance or PI or work comp. It has nothing to do with that. It has strictly to do with a qualification in your practice. And typically it's due to some kind of financial hardship. That's what documented hardships are for. And typically, like I said, if you want to go ahead and have a structured program for that's been designed for you, talk to KMC University about that. Next is contractual agreements. Contractual agreement. This is traditionally what you refer to as your contracted provider for Blue Shield or Blue Cross or Aetna or HealthNet or whatever. You're contractually you have a contract with them. And this is where, again, I go away from, do not have the language in your practice that I have a quote unquote Blue Shield fee schedule. That's not what you have. You have your standard fees, but if you're a provider for Blue Shield, you've by contract agreed to accept a discounted reimbursement. That's what you've agreed to. Now, this is also where ChiroHealthUSA comes into play. When you're a member of theirs, as many of you probably are, you've agreed and you have a contract now that if a patient becomes a subscriber to them, by contract, they're allowed to have a discount on your non-covered services. That's ultimately the purpose of that. And the last is a compliant prompt pay. That's the fourth way we do this, is where you do a discount. And this is where you're saying, hey, you promptly paid for my services. Some people call it a bookkeeping discount. There's different names for it. It all means the same thing. But when we say it's compliant, basically what that means is it falls within certain guidelines, which I'll get to in just a moment here. So here we go. I'm just going to repeat these again. Required by mandate. That's your state or federal programs like Medicare. Again, it's not a Medicare fee schedule. It's a Medicare discount. Think of it that way. I know we don't think about discounts with Medicare, but from a reimbursement standpoint, you've agreed to accept a lower reimbursement for the fee that you normally charge. Next is the documented hardship, which I already talked about, that you could talk to KMC if you need to. But basically, it's where people fall within certain guidelines that you've established in your practice, and people are allowed to have a certain discount. Next is the contractual agreement. Again, I just said this is when you're a participating provider or you're a member with a discount medical plan organization. As you know, ChiroHealthUSA is our favorite DMPO to utilize. And then last, I mentioned prompt pay, and I said that needs to fall within guidelines. And the guidelines basically come from prior to 2009, it was the wild, wild west, and people were doing all kinds of discounts, and there was really nothing saying what you could or couldn't do. 2009, the OIG issued an opinion, and their opinion matters. For those of you who are wondering if it matters or not, it does matter, and they basically put out a letter saying that anything between 5 and 15% was considered reasonable, and anything over 15% would be considered a risky move for you to do when it comes to your prompt pay discounts. So this is where we come from with the guideline. It basically says if you're going to discount those services when someone's paying out of pocket, and they promptly pay according to your prompt pay guidelines. And what I mean by that is doctors, you have the freedom to establish the rules of prompt pay in your practice. So does that mean they paid you the same day? Does that mean they paid you the same week? Does that mean they paid you within 30 days? What does it mean in your practice? In my own personal practice, I'll show you what I did. In my practice, prompt pay was defined as if you paid me the same business day or sooner, or prior to. If you didn't pay me today and you paid me tomorrow, you no longer got the prompt pay discount. So that's up to you to define in your particular practice how you do it. But basically that means the person received that discount should they promptly pay. Now, the next thing I want to go into, so here's what I've covered so far for you doctors. I've covered two topics. Number one is how to handle the high deductible. Quite frankly, if it's a really high deductible, now, let me back up for a second. If it's not a high deductible and it's low enough where you're going to utilize it, you could still provide the discounts for the non-covered services, but any services going towards the deductible are considered covered, so they would not be discounted. If the person has a really high deductible and they elect to get out of the insurance, and as I shared with you through HIPAA before, they elect to go out, now they're considered a 100% private pay or a cash patient. Now that patient can have discounts applied to your services. I want you to notice something I didn't say. I did not say they become a cash patient so they can qualify for your cash fee. And if you didn't catch that, I want to emphasize that because in reality, there is no such thing as a cash fee. And take that as a gospel because what's my company called? Cash Practice. If I thought there was a cash fee, I would be teaching it to you. But there is no such thing as a cash fee. There's no cash discount. There's no cash fee. You have a fee. The question is, how do you compliantly discount that so that the person paying out of pocket, who is considered a cash patient, how do they afford it if your fees are considered, you have a higher fee, again, for PI and work comp and for your insurance patients. So this is where we're going through this exercise is I've shown you two things. How do they opt out? And the second thing is, how do they compliantly discount it? Those are two subjects. Third subject is, what is the best way to collect that fee? What is the best way to collect it? Because quite frankly, you can collect it a variety of different ways. You could have someone pay you one visit at a time. You could have them pay you nothing and then send them an invoice in the mail and hope they pay you. You could do prepays. You could do monthly pay. There's lots of ways you can collect the money. The question is, what is the best way to do it? And quite frankly, there is a best way for different situations in the practice, whether someone's a new patient, whether someone's going to be on a care plan, whether someone's just coming in when they feel like it. There's, depending on how the patient's utilizing your services, will dictate what is the best program to put them on, because it's not the same for everybody. And what I mean by that is, if I go back to the beginning of what I talked about, which was ultimately what we're trying to build here is a practice where you're adding patients and not losing them. If that's attractive to you, if you're excited about the idea of having a practice full of patients who've been with you for hundreds of visits over the course of decades, if that's what you're trying to build, and I assume it is, because that's most chiropractors I talk to, that's what they want. They want to get off the new patient treadmill. They want to get off the heroin addiction of new patients. They want to have a practice full of practice members. If that's what you're shooting for, then pay close attention to what I'm about to share with you, because how you collect your fees greatly impacts your patient visit average, your PVA. So let's go through this. Pay per visit. This is by default the standard thing. You know, if someone comes in, they pay for an individual visit, and that's how you collect. Everybody comes in, they stop at the front desk and pay. If that's your model in practice for every patient who comes in, guess what? You're going to have a PVA stuck around 12. I don't care what else you do in practice. I don't care what education you use. I don't care what posters you use. I don't care what new patient workshop you use. I don't care what emails you send out. It doesn't really matter. Based upon that business model of a pay per visit, you will get stuck right around 12 visits. End of story. That we've seen this in practice. We have the vantage point at our company of seeing thousands of practices now. And the practices that are stuck in this pay-per-visit model, no matter what they do, they get stuck at a PVA of 12. So if you're wondering why your PVA is low and your pay-per-visit, that's it. It's because you're collecting money pay-per-visit. Now, there is a person who should be paying per visit. Then necessarily should be, that chooses to pay per visit. If you want to improve that, I'll share with you at the end, after I get through these 4 types, how to improve each of these. The next one is a block of visits, doctors. So what is a block of visits? A block of visits is where you're in the habit of having patients buy 10 or 12 or 15 visits at a time, something like that, and they just purchase them in a block. You know, hey, here's $400 for 10 visits or something like that. And the doctors who are doing these blocks of visits generally are doctors who are having people buy care to go from re-exam to re-exam. We call it re-exam to re-exam care. Typically is what's going on. So the report of findings, if you're doing one, and hopefully you are, your report of findings sounds something like this. You say to a patient, hey, John, let's get you started. I'll reevaluate you next month, and we'll take it from there. That's generally your recommendations. You're telling someone, we're going to start you with care. I don't know how long it's going to take. I'll reevaluate you next month, and we'll take it from there. And what ends up happening is you have the patient buy enough visits to get to the next re-exam. That's generally the practice I see doing this. And the challenge is you get stuck around 24 to 36 visits. And what we've observed is the reason why your PVA never gets higher than that is because in most circumstances, your patients are dropping out after the first, second, or third re-exam, assuming they even get to 3 re-exams. And why is that? It has nothing to do with chiropractic. It has everything to do with mismanaging the patient's expectations. When the patient doesn't know that you think they're going to need 4 or 5 or 6 months of care, assuming that's the case, and they don't know that, and you're just basically saying, let's go from re-exam to re-exam, every re-exam, what you end up communicating to the patient is, John, you still need more care. You're not there yet. You're doing great. You're making good progress, but we're not done yet. And all the patient keeps hearing is, buy more care, buy more care. And in their mind, all they start thinking is, all they want me to do is keep coming back, so I have to buy more care. Now, it has nothing to do with chiropractic. It has to do with the psychology of the fact that patients don't know there's an end. That's really what it comes down to. So if you're in the habit of blocks of visits with your patients, your PVA will never, ever go above 24 to 36. I have a patient and someone asking, what over time is my PVA based? So the PVA model, when I share with you, I sold my practice in 2011 and my PVA was just over 300 visits. That was over a 5-year term. That was a 5-year window of time that we looked at. So an extended period. It wasn't a short term. And also I have to mention, and I'll be, again, totally transparent here, the PVA model that I use, I don't use the traditional formula. I don't use the traditional formula of so many visits divided by new patients. That formula doesn't work, just so you know. If you're using that formula, it's meaningless. It tells you nothing. I will finish this section and I will go back and, if I have time, to address why that formula is meaningless. Next is prepay plan. Prepay plans are what you traditionally think of. Oh, someone's prepaying for 6 months or 8 months or a year. And a lot of doctors do these, and they are very successful in enrolling patients. Generally, the doctors doing these tend to be more salesy in their presentation. That's the honest truth. When I see doctors doing these, that tends to be the case. I did them early in my career. I moved away from them as time went on because of some of the challenges I found with them. And I'll just mention the two challenges I came across with prepayment programs is, number one is it stinks when people need a refund. You know, someone drops out of care or they move away, or as I share in the movie that I talked about earlier, the movie we did, The Calling, there's a scene where I talk about 3 military families leaving my practice in 1 week who had all prepaid me. And that's a true story, that the military, something came up and 3 of the families I was taking care of moved away. And I had the pleasure of writing about $10,000 on refunds that week. That's the challenge with prepays, is you don't own that money. You don't have that money until the time goes on. Now, from the standpoint of prepay plans, the other challenge with them is the renewal rate isn't great. When people renew on care plans, when they renew later on, there's not a great re-sign rate. We see a much higher re-sign rate when they're not on those. So typically, prepay plans, we see about 50 to 75 visits. 50 to 75 visits is generally what we see when those. Quite frankly, the monthly auto debit is the last one, and this is something I did in practice, and we just observed that the practices that do this have the highest PVA practices. Across the board, we have that. I'm looking at the question that came in, and I will come back to that in just a moment regarding the question regarding again, getting in the PVA. I will address actually, let me just do it right now. So the traditional formula of PVA, is simply this. You take a bunch of patients, how many you've seen, you divide it by the number of new patients in that given period of time. The challenge with that is the fewer new patients you see, the artificially inflated, the bigger the PVA. If you understand math, you know when you divide by a smaller number, the result is a bigger number. So if you're seeing fewer new patients, your PVA artificially improves. But that isn't even really the reason why. That isn't really the reason why, because what is PVA trying to tell you? The statistic is trying to tell you is, on average, how long does someone stay with you? So let me give you an example. And I wasn't originally planning on talking about this, but since it came up, let me just address it. If I was asking each of right now, the exercise is, I want you to go out with your kid, and on the corner, you're going to set up a lemonade stand. You're going to teach your kid about selling lemonade on the corner to the neighborhood kids. And you want to figure out, on average, how many lemonades do you sell per day? So on Monday, you sell so many. Tuesday, you sell so many. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So 5 days a week, you're selling lemonade. And the formula for figuring out, on average, how many lemonades per day you sold was simply this. You add up all the lemonades you sold divided by 5 days, and that'll tell you, on average, how many per day you sold. I want you to notice there was nothing in that formula that talked about new customers buying lemonade. It has nothing to do with how many new people showed up. Nothing at all. So what I'm getting at is that when we use a formula in our practice for getting patient visit average, and it's dependent on new people showing up, I got to make you aware it's a flawed formula. It just doesn't mean anything. I think it was invented by a practice management coach some years, probably 50 years ago or something. And when I bring up this formula to people who know math or statistics or engineers, they all look at me like, no wonder chiropractors are crazy. That has no meaning whatsoever. So if you really want to know a true PVA formula, here's what you do. You take a cohort of patients. So you look at, what I mean by cohort is you say all the patients who showed up in January 2017. Give me all of those patients in January 2000 that were my new patients, and now let me look at their charts over a given period of time. And you say, look at those charts over the last 24 months or the last 36 months. And you add up all the visits they had, and you divide it by that number of people that came in the month of January. It has nothing to do with the current new patients showing up, nothing whatsoever. It's just strictly that cohort of people. And then you might look at the February of 2017. All right, give me all of those people who showed up in 2015, grab their charts, look at them over an extended period of time, add up all of the visits they've had as a group, and divide it by that number of people that came in. So if you had 20 people come in February and you add up the visits they've had in the last 24 months or the last 36 months, whatever it is, and you add up all those visits and you divide it by those 20 people, it'll tell you on average that cohort of people, that group of people on average stayed this long. That's much more valuable information, much more valuable than simply saying just a random number of people that you're seeing divided by the number of new people currently showing up. Change your formula and you'll get much more. The quality of the statistic is directly proportional to the meaning of the formula. Does it make sense or not? All right, so let's move on past that. So what I want to share with you right now is some examples, and these are actual screenshots of videos that we have on our website. If any of you are curious to hear from doctors from their own mouths sharing their experience with doing this stuff, go to cashpractice.com at some point, scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you'll see these videos, these case studies that we filmed of different members of ours. And they're in their own words sharing, like, for example, this is Dr. Michelle Wozniak from Denver, wonderful doctor, phenomenal doctor. When she came on board, her PVA after some coaching was still around 12 to 15, and after she came on board, I'm sure it's improved from here since, but she got it up to 50 at the time of this filming a few years ago. And then here's Dr. Dr. Jason Day. I was about to say someone else. Dr. Jason Day, who's a rock star chiropractor, wonderful chiropractor, kills it, who 7X'd his PVA from 10 to 70 by following these things. And I'm sure it's even higher than that today from the standpoint of I know he's doing other things in his practice that are growing it besides just the things he's learning from Cash Practice. If you want to learn about some of these things, I would encourage you, just like I gave you that text number before, to download that document earlier, and we'll send it to you as well. Same text message here. Send that same phone number, 619-609-0521. This time text ebook, your name and email, and we will again send you we'll send you the ebook. We'll send you the forms that we sent you earlier in an email, so you have a link to download all that information. So let's review the strategy that I just reviewed with you. Let's review the three things. Number one is patients opt out using their insurance. They opt out of using their insurance through HIPAA. And you might say, how are they able to do that? Well, they have it in there because that document basically says the patient saying, I want to keep my information private, even from my insurance company. That's ultimately what they're doing, is executing their right to privacy, is in essence what's happening there. Number two, use legal discounting methods to build a care plan. That's step two. And I'm going to actually go into showing you now how to build some care plans. That's what I want to show you before we wrap up today. And then offer affordable payment options. And I just went through four examples of pay-per-visit. And I said to you, how are we going to improve each of those, which I will be sure I address. How do you improve pay-per-visit? How do you improve blocks? Well, actually, let me just tell you right now. I'll just tell you right now. If someone's on a pay-per-visit and someone is coming in and says, I just want to pay my visit each time I come in, and we all have those patients who want to do that. If you have that patient, the way you improve that is you have them sign a form. We have one on our website, Cash Practice, for our members, where the patient download it and use this form. That form basically says to you, anytime I come in, I want you to automatically debit my bank account or credit card for my services that I had that visit. So instead of you sending them a bill or having them stop at the desk to make a payment, they just have a card on file or a bank account on file, and your staff know they have permission now to go debit their account for those services when they come in. This is no different than a patient leaving you their insurance card and giving you assignment of benefit, where basically they say, anytime I come in, bill my insurance. This is no different. In this case, they're just leaving their card on file in a legal compliant manner. We have a way of doing that properly, that the staff know they can go into the software, access that card on file, and then run the transaction for that individual's visit. That works really great for some patients where they just want to come in when they feel like it. They come in once in a while and you just bill them with the card on file. Or even existing patients, they say, put that pillow you just gave me. You gave them a pillow or a traction unit or something, or orthotics, and they just say, just put it on the card on file, or some nutritional supplements. It works really well in that regard. I also mentioned the block of visits. So the block of visits I got done saying is not a great program for new patients. And if I didn't say that, I'm saying it now. For new patients, a block of visits is not great, but it is great for a patient who comes in on their own schedule. We all have patients who just come in when they feel like it. They may come in 3 times this month and twice next month and once the next month and 4 times the next month. And they just come in haphazardly. We might have an airline pilot or someone who just isn't around a lot. They just want to come in when they feel like it. That person who's not on a fixed schedule or a regular schedule does great on a block of visits. It's similar to a person who's pay per visit, but a block of visits works better because you're not doing an individual transaction each visit. And instead, what you do is you have them buy, let's say, 10 visits at a time. But what we suggest you do is you have that in an auto-renewing block of visits, where after every 10 visits, you automatically charge them for the next 10 visits, and it's up to them to tell you if they don't want to continue doing that. But otherwise, you're just going to make the assumption every time they've had their 10th visit, you just automatically charge them for the next 10 visits, and that way they just keep coming in when they feel like it. Again, the whole model here is we're not talking about the patient, the doctor who wants to get a patient in, get them out of pain, and get them out the door. If that's you, this strategy isn't for you. This is for the 95% of chiropractors who want patients who become part of your lifetime wellness maintenance practice. That's what we're referring to here. And so those are the two strategies that we recommend you do to improve pay per visit and blocks of visits. So what I'm going to do right now is switch gears and talk about what are the best things to do for a new patient that you're recommending a program of care for. And that's what we're showing here is a patient enrolling in care. And here's your 3 options you want to offer people. So here's the model. Let me paint the picture. The model is you itemize all your services. You have an itemization of all your adjustments, all your therapies, all your progress exams, all your products, everything is included into one package, and obviously that's going to come to some total fee. That's, whatever it is. In this case, in this example, it came to $4,193. Don't get fixated on the numbers, because I know in your practice it's going to either be higher or it might be lower, depending on how much care you're providing and what your fees are, et cetera. The structure is, though, you itemize all of the services all up front for the patient, what's covered by insurance, what's not covered by insurance, that's all in there, and then it comes to some total fee. And the first option we give a patient is option 1 we refer to is a recurring monthly payment. And that recurring monthly payment is in sync with their treatment plan. So if their treatment plan was 6 months, or if it was 12 months or 8 months, whatever the treatment plan is, that's how many monthly payments they're offered. It's not out of sync, it's in total synchronicity with their plan. Next is an option of making a larger down payment, in this case $1,331, with smaller monthly payments. That's the example of a second option. Quite frankly, it is the best option you can offer patients. I loved it in practice. It was phenomenal, because what ends up happening is people make a down payment, so they're committed to care, they're on board. Think of yourself when you purchase things in your life. When you make a down payment, you're definitely more engaged with it, which we love about that part of it, as well as we all know that you're providing a lot more care up front with a patient typically, so it covers the scenario that should they stop early, something of that nature happens, you're not going to be chasing the patient for money. If anything, you probably owe them some money back if they were to stop early. Then it follows by monthly payments. So there's in this case, it's $1,331 down, followed by $245 a month in this example. And then the third option, as I mentioned, is a prepayment. And I just got done saying earlier that I moved away from prepays, which I did. I stopped offering them for a while. I took them off my plans. But what I discovered was about 5% of my patients who came in for these programs, or we put them on a program, they asked to prepay. They actually said to me, I don't see it on here, but can I just write you a check for the full amount? And those patients asked to do it. And it dawned on me, there's a percent of the population, and it turns out to be about 5% or so of our population of people in America, people in general, prepay for things. When they buy cars and TVs and furniture, they just write a check for it. They don't put it on payments. But 95% of our patients, our practice members, that's not how they operate. They choose a monthly payment. So that's why these first 2 options are so popular and they're so commonly chosen. Now, once we do that, I want to go ahead and give you an example of building out a plan. Now, this one says building payment plans patients will say yes to, and it says an example of 75 visits over 12 months. Before you guys start passing judgment or anything, I'm not telling you you need to do 75 visits over 12 months. You do what you think you need. You're the doctor, you're the clinician, but by all means, make a decision as to what it is. I talk to doctors all the time, and it blows my mind. We've been in practice 20 years, and I say, you do know what it's going to take to get this patient well. And they're like, well, I'm not sure, and they're wishy-washy about it. I'm like, how could you be in practice 20 years and not have an idea of what you need to do over a period of time for when the patient presents to you? Get good, get confident in your clinical recommendations. Now, does that mean it can't change? Of course not. Of course it could change over time. I'm just simply saying, pick something. Pick a number, the number of months, what you believe clinically is required to accomplish the goal. In fact, when I started building cash practice many years ago, and I built the cash plan calculator, which is what I'm referring to right now, the tool for building these plans, I built it specifically because no 2 patients were the same. I didn't use cookie cutter plans. We wanted to custom tailor it for an individual patient. So here's an example that just for illustration purposes, that's 75 visits over 12 months to, in my own particular practice, I'll share. What was I doing in practice? I was providing care in order to restore a cervical curve. So if someone came in and had an alordotic cervical curve, and they came with headaches and numbness down their arm, and they couldn't swing their tennis racket, and they had weakness in their hand, or whatever their clinical complaint was, if I examined them and I saw their neck was straight when it should have had a cervical lordosis, I was doing a treatment plan to restore the cervical curve. That's why it would take so long and such an extensive period of time. If that's not your game, if you're not doing that, then obviously you don't need 75 visits over 12 months. Maybe you only need 40 visits over 6 months to accomplish functional improvement or restoring posture or whatever it is you do in your practice, which means, doctors, you know what you are trying to accomplish. Do you know what your goal of care is in your practice? I knew in my practice, restore the curve of the neck if they came with a cervical alordosis. What is it in your practice? And that's a subject in itself that we don't have time to get into right now. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you an example of building these plans. Pick the numbers, pick the months. That's up to you to do, doctor. That's not for me to decide. Here's an example we're showing here. And what we're showing in this first line here is what an itemized agreement would look like. And what I'm showing you here is not necessarily what you would show a patient. What you would show a patient would typically be the pay per visit column that shows how many visits and what the cost per visit is. And then it would either show the payment plan column or the ChiroHealthUSA plan column, depending on whether you're using ChiroHealthUSA or not. I'm going to assume that you're using ChiroHealthUSA, so typically you wouldn't be showing the payment plan column. Also, when you're showing these to patients, you wouldn't normally show all the math. You wouldn't show where it says $29.93, 75 visits at $39.90. You're not that you're hiding it, but that what you're doing is when it comes to calculation and you're presenting it to a patient, all the patient cares about is the bottom line. What is it costing them bottom line? So I'm showing you this stuff for the math so that you understand it for the webinar, but when we're presenting it to patients, all of those sections just simply say included, included, included. So here's the first line, adjustments not covered by insurance. Not covered by insurance. So if they're not covered by insurance, that means they're allowed to be discounted. So what you see in the pay per visit column is 75 visits at $60, comes out to $4,500 in this example. And when you look at the far right column with the $29.93, the reason it's able to be discounted is because those were services not covered by insurance. And in that case, we provide the CHIroHealthUSA discounts. Next is progress exams. And I'm just simply showing you here all the different things you could throw into progress films. Here we got therapies. I called it therapy 1, 2, and 3. The takeaway message is we itemize each of the services at our standard fee, our regular fee, our fee, and then we apply the appropriate discount to each line in there, and it comes to some total. In this case, it was $66.95, and it dropped it all the way down to $45.02. Again, don't get caught up in the numbers if those numbers scare you. Nobody's saying you have to charge that high of an amount. Nobody's saying this thing. You're going to define these based upon your fees, your services, your treatment plan. This is just an example. The $45.02 there, we would then go ahead and that right there, we're showing that $45.02. We're going to now take that $45.02 in this case, and we're going to give the patient 3 options, like I shared with you before. Either they're going to pay it monthly, or they're going to make a down payment with smaller monthly payments, or they're going to do a one-time payment, and the patient elects to choose what works best for them. In fact, when we present these to patients, after we present it to the patient, we simply stop and ask them, hey, John, based on these 3 options, can you see yourself doing one of these? Or which of these options works best for you? And then we wait for them to answer us. That's a whole subject in itself. In fact, this last weekend, we just did a seminar on all the software as well as our day 1, day 2. How do you get a patient to say yes to these programs? If you need help with that kind of stuff, like how do I even present programs to patients, that's something we could help you with as well when you become a cash practice client, both through video trainings as well as live seminars. Now, I want to go through an example where a patient has a deductible, has a high deductible or any deductible. So what you're seeing in this example where we highlighted, it says adjustments to meet the deductible. So in this case, we're seeing, I believe that says 25 visits. It's a little small on my screen to see, but it says, I believe it says 25 visits. And then on the far right, it shows the $900 that is the pay per visit. It's still $900 under the 2 other columns, the payment plan column and the ChiroHealthUSA plan column. The reason it's full $900, it hasn't been discounted. Why is that? It's because it's part of the deductible. It's covered services. This is an example where the patient did not, let me repeat, did not opt out of their insurance. They did not opt out, as I shared with you earlier. They chose to use their insurance and still part of it. So doctors, this is for you. If you have that patient who comes in who the deductible is not too large and you're still utilizing the insurance, in this example, whatever services are going towards the deductible are not discounted. Next, we have adjustments covered by insurance. These are the copays. So after the deductible, we're saying there's 25 visits at a $30 copay, I believe that says, or I believe that's what it says. It's hard to work. Again, my screen's a little small, the print. So in that case, actually, let me maximize this so I can see a little bit larger. There we go. Now I can see it. 25 at $30 came to $750. And you'll see, again, it's the full $750, whether you're on the payment plan column or the ChiroHealthUSA discount column. So depending on which one you're using there, but nonetheless, it's full price. There's no discount whatsoever providing to those because, again, they are covered services. Next, we have the adjustments not covered. So again, we were recommending in this case, I believe it was 75 visits. So of the 75, we're saying 25, 35, 40 of the visits, 40 of the first 15 plus 25 were covered. They're covered, whether it's deductible or COVID, so no discounts applied. And then below that, we have the 35 remaining visits of the 75 that are not covered. So those visits, you can have the discount provided in that particular case. So that's what we're showing. That's, in essence, the takeaway message of this slide, as well as the rest of these slides, is simply this. When you're building your plans, whatever services are going towards that are covered, whether it's deductibles or copays, no discount. Everything else that is not covered, you could apply the appropriate discounts to. So that $59.45 in services was reduced all the way down to $41.93. That $41.93 is then again split into either the same three payment options, either a monthly payment, a down payment with smaller monthly payments, or a one-time payment. Those are the three choices the patient are given, no matter what the scenario is. Now, some of you on this call right now, this webinar right now, might be thinking, well, I just use the insurance, and when the insurance runs out, I then later convert them to cash. Well, let me ask you, Doc, how's that working for you? And I can tell you it probably isn't working at all, because we never see that work well. So if you've been in the mindset of, I use their insurance, and when later it's done, I'll then convert them to cash, the reality is, in practice, there might be an exception here and there, but the reality is most people do not continue with care once their insurance runs out unless they've committed to a program right from the beginning, because in this case, imagine the insurance runs out for the patient. When it runs out, guess what? They don't care, because you're not asking them to do anything different. They already know if they've chosen that second option, their monthly payment's $245, even when the insurance runs out. That is the beauty of doing this type of thing. And quite frankly, this is exactly why our two companies, Cash Practice and ChiroHealthUSA, have had such a long-standing friendly cooperative relationship that we've had in the last 10 years. It's because our two companies complement each other. ChiroHealthUSA is the go-to tool for compliantly discounting your services. But it still doesn't dictate how you collect those services, how you collect for them. If you want the most successful way of collecting those fees, you put people on plans in this example, and you package them together and you offer these payment options. We often say we're like a Reese's peanut butter cup. We're the peanut butter, they're the chocolate, or maybe we're the chocolate and they're the peanut butter, whatever it is. But together, we work a lot better together for you. To illustrate again, here's another doctor, Dr. Todd Pickman. And many of you who are on Facebook probably see him a lot, because I know he's on Facebook a ton. He's on Facebook a ton, talking to chiropractors about functional fitness and functional health and improving that type of practice. Anyway, he's a client of ours, been for a long time, and he goes on, when he became a client of ours, he saw an increase, 50% increase in his monthly auto dips when he came on board. One of my favorite stories to kind of wrap up here with is Dr. Felicity Keogh. I encourage you to go watch her video. She's like a lot of chiropractors in that she's a killer chiropractor, great clinician. You can also see her on Facebook, because she's posting a ton of stuff on Facebook about, being, as a chiropractor. But she self-admittedly in our video talks about how she wasn't really great at the business side of things, of enrolling people, and she had a very poor enrollment rate with her care plans and with care. And after coming on board and learning the things that we teach and applying it, nearly 100% of her patients are enrolling in care. At least that's what her comment was at the time of shooting this video. At that time, nearly 100%, and I'm going to guess it still is. And this was maybe a year or two, about 2 years ago, that we shot her video. If anything I said to you intrigues you, if anything I've said excites you, if anything I've said makes you, well, wow, I want to do that. I want to learn more about that. Let me show you how easy it is to learn more about what we do, and I'll turn it back to Christy. Number one is you can go to cashpractice.com and fill out a form to book a 10-minute call with us. We have an easy way for you to just book a time that's convenient for you, and one of our specialists will spend 10 minutes with you on call, or longer if needed, to answer your questions, see whether or not Cash Practice might be a right fit for you. And if it is, then they'll be happy to book a demonstration of Cash Practice software for you. Our company, Cash Practice, we're software and training. We give you the software, the tools, as well as the training to successfully implement that. The way you do that is go to cashpractice.com. You'll see a button on there that says free consult. Click that button. It'll bring up that calendar for you to pick a day and time to book a call at your convenience with one of our new member specialists. They'll answer your questions. They'll be happy to help you. I know I've gone 52 minutes right now, so I'm going to turn it back to Christy. Any questions, any comments, anything we need to wrap up with? Thank you so much, ChiroHealthUSA, for allowing me to be, again, I participate on your webinar series. It's always a pleasure, and it's always exciting to present these for you guys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bodzin. It is always great to have you on the webinar series, and I just want to thank you, because your schedule is crazy busy, and we always appreciate you taking the time to be a presenter and help educate the chiropractic community about these things that are seriously impacting their practice, and seeing those higher deductibles and higher copays. It is crazy. I remember when I started working for Dr. Foxworth, the highest copay was like $5,000, and now we have patients with $12,000 to $15,000. I mean, not copays, but deductibles, a $5,000 deductible,
right.
And now we have patients with $12,000 to $15,000 deductibles, which is, like we say, phantom insurance. So
yeah, exactly.
we did have.
And
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, one thing I like to say is that this stuff that I just went over, this is kind of where in your practice the rubber meets the road. What I mean by that is, care plans and payment plans. It's not an exciting topic, but at the end of the day, if you're not good at your day one, day two, if you're not good at building care plans, if you're not good at building financial plans, if you're not good at this, it doesn't matter how good you are at all the other stuff. You're not going to have people staying with you. So that's why I say it's really kind of where the rubber meets the road. And every other person that I speak to who's kind of like, I guess you would say, a speaker on the circuit, or no matter what the topic is, when we actually have a conversation and in kind of in private, we sit down and talk, we all agree, like, listen, you got to get good at enrolling people in care. Otherwise, you never have the opportunity to do all the other stuff with them. This is why it's such a passionate topic for me.
Well, if you need to get that direct link to schedule the consult, just hit send link in the Q&A box, and I'll send that to y'all directly. So you can just click and schedule that consult with the great team at Cash Practice. And I mean this and being absolutely sincere. I love every single person who works there. They are the most amazing people that you will ever work with. Unbelievable customer service, which is so rare in a day and age where it's like a diamond in the rough. Y'all all know what I'm talking about. Nobody likes calling your internet provider, your cell phone provider, really anybody going out to eat. Customer service is just one of those things that we wish that we saw better of in the world. But when you call Cash Practice, it is unbelievable customer service. Their team is just amazing. So if you want that link to schedule that call, type link. I'll send it to you really quick. We do have a couple of questions. The first one says, over a 5-year average, but during what time would one be seeing 12 or 14 to 12 or 24 to 36 visits? Hold on. Over a 5-year average.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I follow the question. Is it per day, per hour, per week? I'm not quite, because when I think of per day, per hour, per week, I think of how many visits per hour you're seeing. I'm just simply saying, when I talk about a 300 plus PVA, I'm simply saying, if you look at people who on average, okay, so when I did these different cohort studies, like I said, I had people who had been with me 500 visits, 600 visits, 700 visits, 800 visits, people all over the place. But when you look at an average across my population of patients who came to see me, on average, they stayed with me at the time I sold. The average was 5 years, 300 plus visits. That's on average. And I had been there, 18 years. So that doesn't mean every person was with me forever. Some had been with me much longer and some much less. But again, that's an average is an average. So that's what we're looking at. So I'm not sure if I answered their question or not, but that's all I can safely say about when it comes to how we figured out, how long people stay with you.
And I did, and I just sent them a message that said if this is not, and I do believe it was about PVA when it popped up, that if we didn't answer that question correctly, please let us know, and we'll
question came out. How would you implement this? Yeah, someone asked the question just now, Jan. I see that. Thank you. How would you start to implement this with your patients who are using insurance already? So, great question, and I know we got to wrap up. I'll just take this question and we'll wrap up, and then all others we'll get back to later. We'll email back. So, if they're in it, here's what we teach you. When you learn to do this stuff, you don't use it with your current patients. You learn to do this with new patients. Once you get good at it with new patients, we do have a 3-step strategy for converting old practice members. It's really beyond the time we have left to go through that strategy, but there is a formula. There is a strategy we go through for converting old practice members. But when you learn this stuff, you get good at it with new people first. So there's usually about a 3 or 4 month period of getting good at it with new people. And then depending on the size of your practice, it could be anywhere from 6 to 12 months to convert all of your existing practice members one at a time over to these new types of programs.
Wonderful. I really encourage you to visit their website, cashpractice.com. And again, if you are going to be at Parker Vegas, don't miss the opportunity to hear Dr. Bodzin live and in person. He is absolutely amazing on a webinar. You will be a changed person and so lifted up about the chiropractic profession if you hear him. And he's just standing right there in front of you in the room. And I can say that because I have been there in the front row. Sometimes I have to be in the back row, though. But so many times I've heard him in the 7, 8, 9 years that I've had the pleasure of working with him and his team at Cash Practice. Hands down, you really don't want to miss it. Check him out, Dr. Margie Smith as well. And, of course, Holly Jensen, who you saw from the original photo. There is a reason why their team stays together for decades, not years, but decades. Absolutely amazing. Next week, we're going to be having Lisa Massajuski West, who's going to be talking about, is outsourcing your billing right for you? It's a question that we get all of the time, and it's right for some practices and not right for others. So if you're really curious if this would be beneficial to your practice or not, check out that webinar, register early. The following week, we're going to be touching on marketing again and how to appear multiple times on Google's first page. Great question that we get, and we're going to have our presenter, a first time, Ali Nickpour, who's going to be with us from Chiro Matrix. And then, of course, we're going to talk about wrangling your accounts receivable with the Brandy Brimhaw at the end of the month. We've got our webinars posted all the way through April, and we're adding more every single week. Be on the lookout. You will see Dr. Bodzin and other parts of his team, are members of his team, joining us on the webinar series throughout 2019. So be sure to fill out that feedback form. Let us know what topics you're interested in, what speakers you would like to see. Dream big. Dream big. I had a couple of people who said they wanted Heidi Havoc. Well, it took a while, but I got Heidi Havoc. She's coming in April. We had a couple of people who said they wanted Garrett Gunderson. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? He is going to be on the webinar series in the next couple of months, so be on the lookout. Send your request. Let me know what you want to hear about. Let me who you want to hear from, and we will get it scheduled. Dr. Bodzin, thank you so much. And I am so excited, counting the days, so I'll see you and your team in Vegas.
Thanks so much again. You guys have a great one.
All right, that's a wrap.